Hello everybody, June here. Today I'm outside on the terrace of my apartment in Seville and I want to talk to you about some tips and some insights about visiting Seville. As you may or might not know, I have been here in Seville for a total of about 4 months in this year of 2018. Can you hear the church bells? There's a church right there. Let's wait. Okay, the bills are done. So yes, I have been here for a total of almost 4 months over 2 trips this year, and I have amassed quite a bit of knowledge and information about Seville from the perspective of a traveler who is not here just for 2 or 3 days, but who has spent a lot of time here. So I don't actually know how many of these tips I'm going to give you because I'm going off the top of my head. I don't have a script. But the first thing that we need to talk about is when to visit Seville. As a parent, I know that it is very tempting and sometimes the only option to visit places in the summer because that is when kids are out of school. But summer is a terrible time to visit Seville. First, it is ungodly hot. It is probably one of the hottest cities in Spain. And yes, I know people come to Spain for the beaches and the sand and the water and the heat, but none of that is here in Seville. All of that is in the coast. So if you're just coming to Seville, summer is not a great time. Which coincidentally means that in August, this place is actually a ghost town. All of the people who live in Seville just leave. They go to the coast, they go on their vacations, they go on their holidays, and the town is a shell of a town. If your idea of coming to Seville is seeing sort of like a Disneyland-esque place, then I guess come in August. Otherwise, don't. Another time that I would personally avoid is during Holy Week, so Semana Santa, Easter, and the April Fair, because those times the city is just absolutely jam-packed, not only with tourists, but also with people who come from other towns around Seville, and it is a mess. Getting around during Easter and the processions is impossible, and unless you actually want to come here to see the Easter processions, or unless you want to come here specifically to see the April Fair, do not come at those times because it is just going to make your trip unbearable, especially if you're not expecting it. Another weekend that is very bad to come to Seville is what is it, the 12th or so, I believe, of October. Is what in the US is Columbus Day. Here they celebrate Hispanic Heritage Day. But it is so busy here that time. I was here this October for that, and I was watching the news and they were saying that in Seville the hotel capacity was 98% that weekend. Walking around in the town, I believe it. It was so bad that I decided I was not going to leave my apartment. I was going to stay put and out of the crowds. So I've told you a lot of times when it is not great to come to Seville, so when is it good to come to Seville? Well, I have to say from personal experience, the most enjoyable time for me as a tourist was in January and in February. It sounds like a strange time, but it is actually when the crowds are the smallest. It is a bit cold, but the days are still beautiful. I mean, this is not like tundra cold by any means. The days are beautiful. The crowds are their minimum. It is all around enjoyable, and you get to see the orange trees full of oranges, like oranges. It is very pretty. It is my favorite time in Seville. You can come in October when it starts getting cooler. So when I came at the beginning of October this month, it was very hot, but now, as you can see, I'm wearing a sweater because it has cooled down. The crowds are still, however, monumental. I have to walk by the Real Alcázar every day, twice a day, and even in the morning before they close, the line is already around the corner. It is pretty nutty. There's a lot of people everywhere, so like I said, personally, I would avoid coming at those times. I would come in January and in February. So while I am on the topic of the best time to visit Seville, I want to touch on how long to stay here. I have seen so many people recommend trying to do Seville in 1 day, and I have a lot of thoughts about that. First of all, if you're coming at a time when there's a lot of tourists, you will stand in line to see the Alcázar all day, and then you'll be in there, so there goes your day. I do not believe that for anyone at all, 1 day is enough. 2 days, I would think is a minimum, but really 3 or 4 days, especially if you want to go on any day trips, which there is a lot to do around here. So please, please, please do not come for a day and think you're gonna be able to see everything or even the major sites, because you won't, and it will be a very long and a very tiring day. Next, we're gonna talk about safety. I actually didn't know anything about safety in Seville when I first came here earlier this year, and I have to say that I have been completely at ease every time, and I do get up to go to work very early. The sun rises very late here, relatively speaking, and so by the time I'm at work, the sun is usually still not risen, although we just had a time change, so now we've gone back an hour. So basically what I'm trying to say there is that I walk by myself every day in the dark in the narrow streets, and not once have I felt unsafe. I haven't heard anyone being pickpocketed. I haven't heard anyone having any kinds of issues. Seville is a very, very safe city. So whether you're coming with family, whether you're coming alone, safety really is not a problem. And because people here stay up so late at night, even in the wee hours of the morning, there's still people around. People start to settle probably around 2 or 3 in the morning, maybe. So safety, not a concern at all. Moving right on. One thing that I see tourists struggle with all the time here is driving. Especially driving in the old city center, where the streets sometimes are like this narrow, and I'm not kidding. Obviously you can't drive on those, but there's a lot of streets here that you look at them and you think, oh, this has to be a pedestrian walkway, and it is not. It is a street. And every day I see tourists struggling trying to drive down these streets. So I would suggest you do not drive in Seville. First of all, Seville itself is extremely walkable, and actually it would be very difficult to get around the city as far as tourism goes with a car. So if you are planning on driving around, leave your car in a garage or somewhere else, or avoid it altogether by taking the train. Public transport in Spain is pretty great, and you can get to most of the big and even medium-sized cities on the train from here. You go to Cordoba and it's 45 minutes on the speed train, about an hour and 40 minutes to Cadiz on also a speed train. So it's really great, but driving in Seville is insane. Not only are the streets narrow and difficult if you're not used to them, but they're all one way. As you can imagine, they're very narrow. They're all one way, and unless you know where you're going, you're gonna be lost, you're gonna scrape your car. Finding parking is impossible, so don't drive here. Don't do it. And I realize this is like wildly just discombobulated and all over the place. But let's talk about food. Do you eat pork? If you don't eat pork, you're gonna have a bad time. There's just no two ways about it. There is a lot of pork here, and most of the meat that you will eat is pork, or rather, most of the meat that will be offered to you in restaurants is pork. So if you don't eat pork in some kind of way, shape, or form, yes, you're gonna have a very difficult time. I imagine, although I don't know from personal experience, that vegans would also have a very difficult time. So there's a lot of pork, and most of the restaurants, actually I would say probably 99% of the restaurants serve tapas. It's really, really difficult to find a restaurant that will just serve you a big plate of food that isn't a bigger size of their tapas. Once upon a time, I hear that that wasn't the case, but since tapas became fashionable, that's what they do, and tourists eat it right up, pun intended. And on the topic of restaurants too, please, 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 sure, try your little restaurant by the cathedral if you want, but venture out. If you go just even 5 minutes walk from the cathedral, you'll see restaurants and bars that are full of locals. This is a town where the division between local and tourist is really difficult to ascertain, because locals go to all the bars, to all the restaurants, same as the tourists do. So It is really difficult. But the further out you go from the cathedral, the less touristy it is, as you can imagine. So do yourself a favor and try restaurants and bars and cervecerias that are further away from the cathedral if you have the time, because it is absolutely worth it. And if you have any thoughts about that, you can ask me in the comments and I'll tell you what my favorite restaurants are. One of them is actually quite a bit of a walk from the cathedral, but absolutely worth it. And because, hello, I love food, ice cream. There are a lot of ice cream shops here in Seville. I know because I tried a lot of them. And the best one by far is called Bolas, B-O-L-A-S. And the one that I go to, I think there's two, but the one that I go to is the one that is behind the Church of San Salvador, which is right by the shopping center. And they have ice cream, they have sorbets. It's amazing and it is the best. And don't waste your money on like the Amarim stuff or whatever else it's called. Bolas is the place to go. Okay, one last thing about restaurants and food. It can be confusing that a lot of these eating establishments have different names. Some are restaurants, some are bars, some are cafes, some are cervecerias, and ultimately most of them are the same. There are very few places that serve only alcohol. Some of them will always serve something to eat with them, even if it's, I don't know, ham or olives or something like that. And most of them will open late. People here in Seville eat very late. So for dinner service, a lot of the places open at 8. The places that are open all day long are targeting tourists. However, I have found that unless you really want to eat late, if you want to eat at a normal time, try to find a restaurant that is open, say at 6, because you get the least amount of people, better service, you won't have to wait in line. A lot of places will get really busy later, and if it's a really, really good place or a particularly popular place, you'll be waiting in line. So to eat in the middle of the afternoon, you have to find either tourist places or freidurias, which are places that fry fish and usually counter service. But yeah, so most of them serve the same food regardless of what they're called, and they close in the afternoon and then they open in the evening. Moving on, let's move on to something not food because I'm getting hungry. Let's talk about opening times for things. If you want to go shopping, please be aware that a lot of the stores in the shopping district is called the Centro. A lot of the shops do still close between 2 and 5. Many don't, but a lot of them do. So keep that in mind. And in summer specifically, between 2 and 5, there is nobody out. Everyone is, at least all the Sevillanos are in their homes in the air conditioning and not dying in the civilian heat. I actually don't have a whole lot more to say about shopping. I do have a blog post about fabric shopping in Seville, so if you want to check that out, I'll put it in the description. Another thing that I want to suggest to you has to do with attractions and tickets and lines. As I said, the lines for the cathedral are huge, the lines for the Real Alcázar are huge, but you can actually bypass that. You can buy your ticket online and then you won't have to stand in that long line because your ticket will be timed. It will be timed for the time you go in, not for the time you leave. So it's not like your ticket will say, 4:30 to 5. It'll say 4:30, and so when you show up at the gate at 4:30, and you may have to stand in a shorter line, but you'll bypass the hundreds of people who did not buy their ticket online. Now there is, I believe, a fee to buy these tickets online, but for me, to avoid a line of several hundred people is absolutely worth it. And like I said, I walk by there every day, at least twice a day, and I always see that long line, and the lines for online tickets, non-existent. Also for attractions, yes, you can go in the cathedral and you can just walk around, but I would highly recommend that you do the roofs of the cathedral tour. It's a guided tour and you do have to buy it ahead of time, but it gives you access not only to the roof but also to the cathedral, and you also get to bypass that line because you come in through a different entrance, and it also gives you access to a different church. What's it called? I think it might be San Salvador, but don't quote me on that. But the point of that is that once again, you get to bypass the long line. You pay a little bit more, but you also get to see so much more. And yes, sure, the best views of Seville have the cathedral in them, but the views from up there are pretty great too. Alright, so this video is getting to be way too long, so I'm going to leave this here, even though I have a lot of other things I can tell you about visiting Seville. But if you have any questions about anything I've talked about something I haven't talked about, or anything at all relating to visiting Seville, please do let me know in the comments and I will get back to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!